Picture this. You're enjoying your Saturday morning breakfast on the deck you built with your own hands 20 years ago, when a woman in spotless white tennis shoes marches across your gravel path with a clipboard and an attitude. That's exactly what happened when Patricia Thornfield, president of the Oakwood Manor Homeowners Association, decided my modest farmhouse was destroying their pristine neighborhood image. The problem? My 3 acres had been in my family since 1982, while her fancy development didn't break ground until 2018. Standing there beside my vegetable garden, watching her designer sneakers struggle with the uneven ground, I could smell the fresh mulch I'd just spread that morning. In one hand, I held my grandfather's original property deed. In the other, her ridiculous citation for agricultural violations in a residential zone. The spring breeze rustled through my apple trees like nature itself was laughing at this absurdity. What would you do if someone tried to fine you for growing tomatoes on land your family owned for decades? My name's Tom Mitchell, and this is the story of how 2 years of harassment became the best education in property law I never wanted. Back in 1982, my grandfather Ray purchased these 3 acres of Tennessee farmland for $23,000, using his savings from 30 years working at the sawmill. I spent 15 years after inheriting it in 2008, building something special. A sustainable homestead with rainwater collection, organic gardens, and a workshop where I restore vintage farm equipment. My late wife Emma loved watching the sunset from our wraparound porch, planning the greenhouse we never got to build together. Alzheimer's took her 3 years ago, leaving me and Rusty, my old bloodhound named after my granddad's favorite color, to keep her memory alive on the land she helped me nurture. The property sits along the original county highway, surrounded by what used to be dairy pastures and tobacco fields. Then 6 years ago, some Nashville developer decided our rolling hills were perfect for upscale suburban living. Enter Oakwood Manor Estates, 350 elegant homes, perfectly manicured lawns, and residents paying upward of $650,000 for the privilege of living next to what they'd soon call an agricultural eyesore. The county records clearly show my property was specifically excluded from all development agreements. The original surveyor marked my boundaries with bright orange flags labeled "Grandfathered Exempt," and I've got photographs, permits, and documentation stretching back 40 years. Nobody bothered to tell Patricia Thornfield. Patricia moved here from Atlanta 3 years ago, right around the time I was caring for Emma in her final months. 52 years old, insurance executive turned HOA dictator, driving a silver Lexus that looks like it's never seen a dirt road. She's got twin daughters at the private academy, a husband who owns medical clinics, and that special kind of arrogance that comes from never being told you're wrong. This woman measures sprinkler coverage with a measuring wheel. She once issued a violation notice because someone's newspaper sat in their driveway for 3 hours after delivery. Her aggressive vanilla perfume could overpower a skunk at 50 yards. Our first meeting seemed harmless enough. Polite smile, friendly wave. "Good morning, I'm Patricia from the Homeowners Association. Just conducting a neighborhood assessment for community improvements." 4 days later, she returned with what she called the aesthetic compliance team, 2 uncomfortable-looking men in khaki pants who seemed like hostages. Patricia's heels clicked across my gravel like a woodpecker attacking dead bark. "This farming operation is reducing surrounding property values by approximately $75,000 per residence," she announced, brandishing a thick folder of regulations. "You have 60 days to cease agricultural activities or face escalating penalties of $150 daily." I produced my 1982 deed showing clear exemption from future homeowners associations. She barely acknowledged it through her oversized sunglasses. "Grandfather clauses won't shield you indefinitely. This concerns community standards and economic protection." Community standards from someone who moved into a development built around my existing farm. "Ma'am," I said, maintaining the calm tone Emma had taught me during her difficult days. "This land predates your association by 36 years. I'm not subject to your authority." Her smile turned to ice. "We'll see about that." As she strutted back to her Lexus, the crunch of gravel under her expensive shoes sounded different somehow, more menacing, like a timer had just begun counting down. The next morning confirmed my worst fears. I woke to voices and cameras. 3 HOA inspectors were documenting my fence posts, measuring what Patricia later termed property line encroachments. "What exactly are you doing on my land?" I asked. They shrugged apologetically. "Mrs. Thornfield sent us to catalog violations." Violations on property that existed before their entire neighborhood. That's when I realized this wasn't about lawn height or mailbox colors. This was about control, dominance, and an Atlanta transplant who'd never encountered a problem she couldn't regulate into submission. Patricia Thornfield had picked the wrong widowed farmer to intimidate. Emma always said I was too persistent for my own good. Time to prove her right. 3 weeks after the inspection incident, my mailbox became Patricia's personal battlefield. First came the county zoning complaint alleging my property violated new residential development standards, which was laughable since agricultural zoning doesn't disappear because someone builds subdivisions nearby. Then arrived the official HOA demand letter on expensive stationery, requiring $750 monthly fees, retroactive to 2018. Nearly $4,000 for an association I never joined. Patricia wasn't finished demonstrating her newfound authority. She organized a neighborhood petition regarding safety concerns about my workshop. Apparently, my 4 decades of mechanical experience made me a community hazard. The petition claimed my restored tractors could leak fuel without warning, and my welding equipment created dangerous noise pollution. The woman had clearly never heard an actual farm at Sunrise. The ultimate insult came via Nextdoor. Patricia posted in the Oakwood Manor Community Forum about our non-compliant resident threatening property investments. She'd photographed my property from her car, somehow making my organized workshop appear like a junkyard explosion. 47 neighbors I'd never met demanded immediate action about the agricultural eyesore. The bitter taste of betrayal mixed with my morning coffee as I scrolled through those comments. Time for some old-fashioned mechanical troubleshooting. When machinery breaks down, you trace the malfunction back to its source. I spent the following week buried in county archives, learning more about zoning law than any retired mechanic should know. That's when I uncovered Patricia's embarrassing little secret. Her insurance license showed 3 previous violations for misrepresenting coverage limitations to clients. My late wife Emma always said patterns reveal character, and Patricia's pattern was crystal clear. Even better, I remembered something from my union days about liability coverage. A quick record search confirmed my suspicion. The HOA's insurance specifically excluded disputes with pre-existing non-member properties. Some attorney was smarter than Patricia realized, but the real treasure came through public records requests. Patricia's husband's medical practice owed $89,000 in outstanding tax obligations. No wonder she was desperate to shake down everyone else for money. Here's where Patricia made her first crucial mistake. She'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent decades solving problems others couldn't handle. I installed professional security equipment around my property after discovering fresh tire tracks near my fence. Motion sensors, cloud backup, smartphone alerts, everything. Those cameras captured Patricia's next move faster than I anticipated. 5 days later, her compliance patrol was trespassing on my land, photographing my workshop interior and testing gate mechanisms. The irony was beautiful. The woman claiming I was dangerous was literally committing crimes on my property. But that trespassing footage led to my favorite discovery yet. While researching trespassing laws for my police report, I stumbled across something that made me grin like a fool. Patricia's own incorporation paperwork contained a critical error. They'd never properly included my specific parcel in their legal descriptions. Some lazy attorney had used template language without checking actual survey records. In legal terms, Patricia had exactly 0 authority over my land. Less authority than Rusty, actually. The local newspaper made everything public after I sent them Patricia's social media screenshots alongside my 1982 deed. Rural property owner challenges HOA authority, hit the front page of the Wilson County Herald, and suddenly my quiet dispute became regional entertainment. Patricia's response was pure gold. She called the publisher demanding a correction, threatening to cancel her business advertising unless they printed a retraction. The publisher printed her complaint in the opinion section, right beside 4 supportive letters from residents tired of HOA bullying. You could practically feel the momentum shifting. But the sweetest victory came naturally. Mrs. Campbell from 2 streets over appeared at my gate with homemade banana bread and questions about rainwater collection. The warm aroma of fresh baking mixed with spring air as she explained how Patricia had harassed her family about their herb garden, claiming it violated landscape standards. I've been following this entire situation, she said, and honestly, we're all exhausted from being micromanaged. 4 more neighbors contacted me that week with similar stories. Patricia's campaign of intimidation stretched far beyond my property boundaries. She'd systematically targeted anyone who didn't conform to her suburban vision: the Vietnam veteran with the pickup truck, the librarian with the wildflower meadow, the retiree who dared stain his deck cedar instead of gray. The sound of gravel crunching under friendly visitors' feet became my new favorite soundtrack. For the first time since Emma died, my property felt like a community hub instead of a fortress under siege. Patricia had tried to isolate me, transform me into the neighborhood outcast everyone avoided. Instead, she'd accidentally created the exact opposite: a gathering point for everyone tired of her petty authoritarianism. Standing on my porch that evening, watching Rusty chase lightning bugs while neighbors discussed rainwater systems and organic gardening, I understood something important. Emma had always believed good people find each other during difficult times. Patricia's first major error was assuming I'd fight this battle alone. She was about to learn how wrong suburban tyrants can be. Patricia's response to my newspaper victory was swift and brutal. If she couldn't intimidate me with fabricated authority, she'd try to crush me with real attorneys. 5 days after the Wilson County Herald story, a process server appeared at my door with a civil lawsuit. Patricia had hired Morrison, Blake and Associates, a firm specializing in property enforcement litigation, which sounded about as friendly as it was. The lawsuit alleged my property created a public nuisance and health hazard that was causing irreparable harm to neighboring property values. 31 pages of legal jargon demanding I cease all agricultural activities, demolish my workshop, and pay $42,000 in damages to surrounding homeowners. The smell of expensive legal paper mixed with my morning coffee as I read through Patricia's alternate version of reality. According to her attorney, my 40-year-old farm had somehow become a community menace overnight. But Patricia wasn't finished escalating. She organized what she called a safety monitoring committee, basically herself and 4 other board members with notebooks documenting my violations. They'd patrol twice daily, photographing everything from my chicken coop to my vegetable beds, building what Patricia called a comprehensive violation portfolio. The final provocation came when she tried to weaponize the county health department. Patricia filed a complaint alleging my property was a sanitation hazard due to improper composting and potential groundwater contamination from livestock waste. Never mind that I'd maintained proper composting systems since 1995 with all required permits. Patricia figured modern bureaucracy could retroactively eliminate what harassment couldn't touch. That's when I called in reinforcements. My union buddy Steve knew a retired municipal attorney named Helen Rodriguez, who'd spent 25 years fighting exactly these kinds of battles. Helen reviewed my case and started laughing. Never a good sign for the opposition. "Tom," she said, leaning back in her worn office chair, "this is the most incompetent legal strategy I've encountered in 15 years. They're making claims they can't possibly substantiate." Helen's first discovery made my day. Every agricultural permit I'd ever obtained was not only valid but protected under state law. Modern HOAs can't retroactively impose new restrictions on existing farming operations, something Patricia's expensive lawyers apparently neglected to research. But Helen's real brilliance was counter-offensive strategy. Instead of just defending, we filed a countersuit for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with property rights. Patricia wanted a legal war. She'd get one. The tide started changing when Helen discovered Patricia's fatal oversight. While examining the HOA's incorporation documents, she found something that made us both chuckle. The original developer had never properly transferred utility easements to the HOA. Legally speaking, Patricia's organization owned nothing but debt and letterhead. My security cameras provided the decisive evidence. Helen subpoenaed the footage showing Patricia's monitoring committee repeatedly trespassing on my property. Turns out photographing someone's private workshop through windows without permission constitutes both criminal trespass and invasion of privacy. The local newspaper loved this development. HOA president caught trespassing in property dispute made front page again, complete with security camera screenshots of Patricia peering through my workshop windows like some suburban detective. Community reaction divided down the middle, but in my favor. The online neighborhood platform exploded with residents choosing sides. Team Tom included everyone tired of Patricia's regulatory tyranny, while Team Patricia consisted mainly of recent transplants who'd never met a rule they didn't embrace. County Commissioner Jackson started receiving dozens of calls about HOA abuse of authority. Jackson, a third-generation Tennessee resident who remembered when our valley was all working farms, had zero tolerance for imported drama. "I've known Tom Mitchell for 15 years, Jackson told the newspaper. "If Patricia Thornfield thinks she can Californify our county with frivolous lawsuits, she's got another think coming." The pressure was affecting Patricia. Her insurance clients started asking uncomfortable questions about her legal troubles. Nothing kills business faster than customers discovering their agent is embroiled in federal court battles with neighbors. 5 more residents contacted Helen about similar harassment from Patricia's compliance committee. Turns out I wasn't her only target, just the most visible one. Patricia had been systematically bullying anyone who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. But the sweetest victory came from an unexpected source. The original Oakwood Manor developer, Michael Harrison, called me personally after seeing the newspaper coverage. "Tom, I specifically excluded your property from all HOA agreements," Harrison explained, his voice carrying the weight of professional embarrassment. "I've got the original development plans proving it." Patricia either didn't review the documentation or chose to ignore it. Harrison emailed documents that ended Patricia's legal charade permanently. Development plans, exclusion agreements, and correspondence with county planners all confirmed what I'd known from day one. My land was never subject to HOA jurisdiction. The sound of my computer printing Harrison's documents was like Christmas morning. 53 pages of ironclad proof that Patricia had been bluffing with a worthless hand from the beginning. Helen filed the new evidence with the court along with a motion to dismiss all of Patricia's claims and award attorney fees for frivolous litigation. Patricia's expensive lawyers suddenly got very quiet very quickly. Round 2 to the persistent farmer with the grandfathered property. Patricia's desperation reached new heights when her attorneys started abandoning ship. Morrison, Blake and Associates quietly withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with client expectations. Legal speak for our client is completely irrational. But losing her legal team only made Patricia more dangerous. Like a cornered animal, she lashed out in every direction possible. Her next move was breathtakingly audacious and completely illegal. Patricia convinced the HOA board to levy an emergency special assessment of $18,000 on my property for remediation of environmental hazards. The notice arrived on official HOA letterhead, complete with threats of liens and foreclosure proceedings. $18,000 for hazards that existed only in Patricia's imagination. I was still chuckling at the audacity when my phone rang. Sergeant Williams from the county sheriff's office wanted to discuss a complaint filed against me for threatening behavior and verbal intimidation. According to Patricia's police report, I'd confronted her at the farmer's market and made menacing statements about property rights while displaying aggressive body language. The complaint included dramatic descriptions of feeling unsafe and intimidated by my unstable behavior. Complete fiction. I hadn't seen Patricia anywhere except driving past my property in her Lexus. Williams reviewed my security footage and immediately cleared me of all charges. Better yet, he warned Patricia that filing false police reports was a felony. The taste of vindication was sweeter than Emma's homemade peach cobbler. But Patricia wasn't finished with her scorched earth campaign. She organized a boycott of local businesses that supported me, claiming any company that advertised in the Wilson County Herald was enabling property value destruction. The local farm supply owner, Bill Henderson, called to warn me that Patricia had demanded he stop selling me materials or lose all HOA member business. Bill's response was perfect. "Lady, Tom Mitchell's been my customer for 20 years. You've been here 5 minutes. Guess who I'm keeping?" Patricia's most desperate gambit targeted my utilities. She filed complaints with the power company and water department, claiming my rainwater collection system violated safety regulations and demanded immediate disconnection for public safety. The irony was delicious. Patricia wanted to shut off utilities that were perfectly legal and professionally installed. My well water and solar backup made her threats as empty as her legal authority. Meanwhile, my support network was growing stronger. 5 more neighbors contacted Helen about Patricia's harassment campaigns. The retired county judge living in adjacent Davidson County offered pro bono consultation after reading about the case. Even the county tax assessor confirmed publicly that HOAs have zero taxation authority over non-member properties. The story caught fire on social media when someone shared my case on Facebook. The post went viral overnight. HOA overreach started trending regionally, and suddenly I had property rights advocates from across Tennessee offering support. Patricia's reputation was crumbling faster than her legal strategy. The Insurance Commission opened an investigation into her license violations after 5 clients filed complaints about misrepresenting HOA authority during policy sales. Her husband faced public embarrassment when the newspaper revealed his tax liens. Nothing says responsible community leader like owing the state 6 figures while shaking down neighbors for fake fees. The HOA board started questioning Patricia's leadership during increasingly contentious meetings. Board member Dorothy Martinez resigned publicly, citing concerns about aggressive tactics and questionable legal expenses. 3 others followed within a week. Patricia's response to this avalanche of criticism was pure theater. She called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my continuing threat to community safety and property values. The agenda included proposals to hire private security and install surveillance cameras to monitor the non-compliant property. 62 residents showed up. The largest HOA meeting in Oakwood Manor history. I watched from my porch as cars filled the community center parking lot, the sound of slamming doors echoing across the valley like distant thunder. Mrs. Campbell stopped by afterward with meeting details and fresh chocolate chip cookies. "Tom, it was a disaster," she said, the smell of vanilla mixing with evening air. Patricia stood up there ranting about agricultural terrorists and environmental conspiracies. Half the room walked out. The neighborhood Facebook group administrator finally removed Patricia for inflammatory posts and harassment of community members. Her farewell post was a masterpiece of entitled rage about ungrateful neighbors destroying community standards. But the sweetest development came from an unexpected source. An investigative reporter from Nashville Channel 5 called requesting an interview about HOA abuse in rural Tennessee. Apparently my case was part of a larger pattern they'd been researching. Standing on my porch that evening, watching Rusty chase fireflies while the last light faded behind the hills, I reflected on how dramatically things had changed. 8 months ago, Patricia seemed unstoppable. HOA president, insurance executive, suburban queen bee with unlimited authority. Now she was isolated, investigated, and rapidly running out of both allies and legal options. Emma always said, "Bullies eventually destroy themselves if you just give them enough rope." Patricia was about to prove her right in spectacular fashion. The phone call that changed everything came at 7 on a Wednesday morning. Judge Robert Crawford, the retired jurist from Davidson County, had discovered something that made Patricia's entire crusade not just wrong, but potentially criminal. "Tom, you need to sit down for this," Judge Crawford said, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years on the bench. "I've been researching state land records, and your HOA problem is about to become a whole lot bigger." The retired judge had uncovered what Patricia's expensive lawyers either missed or deliberately ignored. Oakwood Manor Estates was built on land with unresolved federal conservation easements dating back to 1967. The Tennessee Valley Authority had never formally transferred development rights to the county government, creating a legal cloud over the entire subdivision. But here's the crucial part. My property was specifically excluded from the original development, precisely because the surveyor knew about these federal complications. Some long-dead attorney had been smart enough to keep my parcel out of any potential federal litigation. Patricia's law firm had been billing the HOA $52,000 for legal research they knew was pointless from day one. You can't enforce HOA authority over land that might not legally belong to the HOA in the first place. Judge Crawford's next revelation made my blood boil. The HOA's financial records, which Helen had subpoenaed, revealed a pattern of systematic fraud that would make a casino accountant blush. $278,000 in legal and consulting fees over 4 years. Money that should have gone to community maintenance and improvements. Patricia's insurance company had mysteriously received $97,000 in property management commissions despite never managing any HOA properties. The special assessments Patricia had been collecting weren't funding community improvements. They were paying her personal legal bills and financing her husband's medical practice expansion. Several HOA board members had invested in Dr. Thornfield's practice just months before approving those mysterious consulting contracts. Federal law requires HOAs to disclose all conflicts of interest in financial dealings, something Patricia had conveniently forgotten to mention. But the smoking gun was hidden in the original incorporation documents. 4 signatures belonged to residents who'd moved away before the HOA was even formed. Patricia had forged legal documents to create her little kingdom of suburban tyranny. The state attorney general's office had been quietly investigating similar HOA fraud schemes across Tennessee. My case wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of corruption that stretched from Atlanta to Arkansas. Judge Crawford's investigation revealed Patricia's true motivation. Her insurance business was hemorrhaging money due to lawsuits from previous clients who'd discovered her coverage misrepresentations. The HOA presidency wasn't about community service. It was about generating legal fees and assessments to cover her mounting debts. Patricia's law firm withdrew the next day, citing newly discovered ethical conflicts. Translation: they'd finally realized they were complicit in fraud and didn't want to face federal charges alongside their client. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss Patricia's removal after Helen delivered copies of the forged documents and financial irregularities. Board members who'd rubber-stamped Patricia's schemes suddenly developed selective amnesia about their involvement. Local media began treating the story as an exposé of suburban corruption rather than a simple neighbor dispute. The Nashville Channel. I've investigation expanded to include federal easement violations and civil rights abuse, charges that carried serious prison time. My property value actually increased due to media attention about my sustainable homestead legally, protected from HOA interference. 4 real estate agents called asking if I'd consider selling to clients specifically seeking HOA-free living. The irony was perfect. Patricia's campaign to destroy my property value had made me the most desirable neighbor in the valley. Standing in my workshop that evening, the smell of sawdust and motor oil mixing with mountain air, I realized the game had fundamentally changed. This wasn't about neighbor disputes or property values anymore. This was about justice. The morning after Judge Crawford's bombshell revelation, my quiet workshop transformed into mission control for the most satisfying legal campaign of my life. My dream team assembled like something out of a heist movie, except instead of stealing diamonds, we were stealing back justice from a suburban tyrant. Judge Crawford brought 25 years of constitutional law expertise and a contact list that could topple governments. Sarah Mitchell, the investigative journalist from Channel 5, arrived with boxes of public records and a nose for corruption that could smell fraud from 4 counties away. The surprise addition was David Running Bear, a federal land advocate who'd driven down from the Cherokee Nation offices after hearing about the easement violations. These land claims have been dormant for decades, he explained, spreading century-old maps across my kitchen table. Your HOA just awakened a very expensive legal nightmare. My mechanic buddy, Steve, volunteered to upgrade my security system with commercial-grade surveillance equipment, borrowed from his cousin's private security company. Patricia wants to play spy games, Steve grinned, installing hidden cameras with facial recognition software. Let's see how she likes being watched. Our legal strategy had 3 components, each designed to destroy a different pillar of Patricia's operation. Helen would file motions to dismiss all HOA claims based on lack of jurisdiction, then countersue for malicious prosecution, defamation, and criminal harassment. Judge Crawford would prepare federal civil rights violations for Patricia's pattern of discrimination against non-conforming residents. Meanwhile, David would file federal sovereignty claims that could invalidate the entire development's legal foundation. If we can prove easement violations in the original land transfer, he explained, every property deed in Oakwood Manor becomes legally questionable. Sarah's financial investigation revealed fraud schemes that would make a mob accountant jealous. Patricia had diverted $143,000 in HOA reserves through a network of shell companies, fake vendor invoices, and unauthorized loans to her failing insurance business. The assessment money residents thought was funding community improvements had actually financed Patricia's family vacation to Europe, her daughter's private school tuition, and legal fees for her husband's tax problems. Federal embezzlement charges carried 15-year prison sentences. My favorite discovery was Patricia's consulting contracts with companies that existed only on paper. Oakwood Landscaping Services had received $48,000 for work never performed, but shared the same address as Patricia's insurance office. Coincidence? The FBI doesn't believe in coincidences. We organized our evidence like a military operation. Timeline documentation showing 4 years of escalating harassment and legal overreach. Financial forensics proving systematic theft from community funds. Video evidence of criminal trespassing and attempted property damage. I established secure communications using encrypted messaging apps Steve's cousin recommended. Judge Crawford insisted on operational security after discovering Patricia had hired private investigators to dig up dirt on my personal life. She's desperate enough to try anything, he warned. The community organizing aspect was pure poetry. Sarah helped me create the Rural Property Rights Defense Fund crowdfunding campaign that raised $89,000 in its first week. Supporters from across the country donated specifically to fight HOA tyranny and suburban corruption. Weekly coffee meetings at Miller's Cafe became strategy sessions for affected neighbors. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee mixed with the sound of people finally fighting back against years of petty oppression. Mrs. Campbell organized carpools to county commissioner meetings where residents demanded investigations into HOA oversight. My HOA accountability toolkit became an overnight sensation when Sarah featured it in her news series. 3 simple steps any homeowner could follow: request detailed financial audits, demand proof of legal authority, and document all harassment for law enforcement. The websites I'd researched for checking HOA complaint histories crashed from traffic after tens of thousands of people discovered they could investigate their own. Association State Attorney General databases across the country reported record searches for HOA fraud cases. Steve's security upgrades turned my property into Fort Knox with solar panels, professional-grade cameras with cloud backup, motion sensors that could detect approaching vehicles from half a mile away, and encrypted recording systems that automatically forwarded evidence to Helen's office. The technical preparation was methodical and thorough. Every HOA violation documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates. Financial irregularities organized into prosecution-ready evidence packets. Federal easement research compiled into legal briefs that could withstand Supreme Court scrutiny. We prepared presentation materials showing Patricia's corruption for the Attorney General's office. Flowcharts mapping money from HOA accounts to Patricia's personal expenses. Photo evidence of forged signatures and falsified incorporation documents. Judge Crawford's favorite moment came when we discovered Patricia's pattern of targeting military veterans, elderly residents, and anyone who didn't fit her suburban aesthetic. That's not just fraud, he smiled grimly. That's civil rights violations under federal hate crime statutes. Standing in my workshop that final evening before the counterattack began, surrounded by evidence of Patricia's crimes and tools for my vindication, I felt Emma's presence stronger than ever. She'd always believed in fighting for what's right, no matter how powerful the opposition seemed. Tomorrow, Patricia would discover that stealing from your neighbors and forging legal documents carries consequences she never imagined. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Patricia's world was collapsing, and desperate people do desperate things. Her first move after the HOA board meeting was hiring a private investigator to dig up dirt on my personal life, as if being a grieving widower who minded his own business was somehow scandalous. The PI she hired was about as professional as her legal strategy. My upgraded security system caught him trespassing 4 times in 3 days, photographing through my workshop windows and rifling through my mailbox. Steve's commercial-grade cameras captured crystal-clear footage of license plates, facial recognition, and criminal activity that would make any prosecutor smile. "Sir, that's federal mail theft," Detective Martinez explained when Patricia tried to spin the story as legitimate property investigation. Her PI now faced felony charges, and Patricia faced accessory charges for hiring him. But Patricia's desperation peaked when she attempted to bribe County Inspector Rodriguez to condemn my rainwater collection system. Sarah's hidden camera caught the entire conversation, Patricia offering $7,000 cash to find safety violations that would require immediate removal of non-compliant water systems. Rodriguez reported the attempted bribery to the district attorney's office within an hour. Patricia had just added corruption of public officials to her growing list of federal charges. Her next scheme was pure theater. Patricia organized what she called a concerned citizens demonstration outside my property, complete with professionally printed signs reading, "Protect our property values and safe communities matter." The turnout was pathetic. 9 people, including Patricia's family, holding signs and chanting slogans while my security cameras documented every face for future harassment prosecutions, the smell of desperation mixed with morning dew as neighbors drove by laughing at the spectacle. Mrs. Campbell organized a counter-demonstration that same afternoon. 51 supporters showed up with Property Rights Matter and Stop HOA Tyranny signs, turning Patricia's demonstration into a public relations disaster. Local news covered both events, making Patricia look like a fringe extremist leading a tiny cult of compliance fanatics. Patricia's final gambit in this round was filing an ethics complaint against Helen with the State Bar Association, claiming she was pursuing frivolous litigation for personal financial gain. The complaint included accusations of collusion with criminal elements and abuse of legal process for political purposes. The State Bar dismissed Patricia's complaint within 24 hours as frivolous and retaliatory. They also opened an investigation into her pattern of filing false legal complaints, a violation that could result in criminal charges for abuse of court systems. Meanwhile, I maintained the high ground through strategic patience that Emma had taught me during her difficult days. When doctors gave bad news, she'd say, "Tom, sometimes winning means not letting them make you become someone you're not." I documented every illegal act Patricia committed while remaining completely above reproach. No angry confrontations, no social media rants, no vigilante justice, just methodical evidence collection and professional legal responses. The media attention was intensifying in ways that terrified Patricia. National property rights organizations rallied behind my cause after Sarah's investigation went viral. Cable news picked up the story as a perfect example of HOA tyranny destroying American freedom. Patricia's disastrous TV interview with Channel 5 became internet legend within hours. Asked to explain the forged signatures, she claimed they were administrative corrections of obvious errors. When pressed about the missing HOA funds, she blamed accounting discrepancies and former board member incompetence. But her most memorable moment came when Sarah asked about the attempted bribery. "That inspector misunderstood my offer to donate to county safety programs," Patricia stammered, sweat visible on her forehead under studio lights. "I never offered personal payments for official actions." The footage of Patricia lying on television while holding the exact bills she'd offered Rodriguez played on repeat across social media. Patricia lies trended nationally for 4 days. My crowdfunding campaign exploded after the interview, reaching $167,000 from supporters across America. Donations poured in from military veterans, rural property owners, and anyone who'd ever fought HOA overreach. The financial pressure was crushing Patricia's remaining support. Her insurance license suspension became permanent after the bribery charges. 4 more HOA board members resigned rather than face federal investigation. Insurance companies canceled all coverage for Oakwood Manor estates due to ongoing criminal activity by leadership. But the sweetest victory was watching Patricia's allies abandon ship. Dr. Thornfield filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. He'd discovered Patricia had forged his signature on several HOA contracts, making him an unwitting accomplice to federal crimes. The sound of moving trucks became common in Oakwood Manor as residents fled before property values collapsed completely. Patricia's campaign to protect home values had achieved the exact opposite. Her corruption investigation made the entire development radioactive to potential buyers. Standing on my porch that evening, watching Rusty chase fireflies while police cars patrolled Oakwood Manor for the 4th time that week, I realized something profound. Patricia's attacks had transformed me from an isolated widower into the center of a nationwide movement for property rights justice. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of her self-destruction. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Patricia's final desperate gambit crossed lines even I didn't think she'd dare approach. When bribery and fraud charges failed to stop the investigation, she decided to attack my mental health. Her first attempt was having me committed for psychiatric evaluation based on what she called increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior. Patricia filed a petition with the county mental health authority, claiming I'd been making paranoid statements about government, conspiracies, and stockpiling weapons in preparation for violent confrontation. The petition included sworn statements from 4 neighbors I'd never spoken to, describing my suspicious nighttime activities and aggressive confrontations with community members. Pure fiction, but presented with enough official paperwork to trigger an automatic 72-hour hold if the judge hadn't demanded evidence first. Dr. Margaret Kim, the court-appointed psychologist, spent 4 hours evaluating me and reviewing Patricia's claims. "Mr. Mitchell," she concluded, "you're not only mentally stable, you're remarkably resilient given the harassment you've endured. Ms. Thornfield's petition appears to be weaponizing mental health services for personal vendetta." Patricia's second attack targeted my environmental compliance. She filed a false EPA complaint claiming my property was an environmental hazard due to improper rainwater storage and contaminated groundwater from illegal septic systems. The EPA inspector who arrived expected to find ecological disaster. Instead, he discovered the most environmentally responsible property in the county. My rainwater system exceeded all safety standards. My septic was newer than most neighborhood systems, and my water tested cleaner than municipal supplies. "Sir," Inspector Williams said while testing my well water, "I wish every property owner was this responsible. Your setup should be the model for sustainable living." Patricia's third scheme was the most audacious, attempting to seize my property through eminent domain. She convinced 4 remaining HOA board members to declare my land blighted and petitioned the county for emergency seizure powers to protect community, health, and safety. The petition lasted exactly 6 hours before County Attorney Sandra Martinez laughed it out of her office. "Ms. Thornfield," Martinez explained publicly, "HOAs don't have eminent domain authority, and Mr. Mitchell's property is the opposite of blighted. It's a showcase of responsible land use." Patricia's final Hail Mary was convincing Sheriff's Deputy Collins that I was a dangerous extremist with weapons stockpiles who posed a threat to community safety. She provided evidence of my anti-government rhetoric and militia connections based on my property rights advocacy. Sheriff Thompson reviewed Patricia's claims personally and reached an obvious conclusion. "Ma'am, Mr. Mitchell is a respected community member fighting legitimate legal battles. Filing false reports about terrorism threats is a federal felony." That's when Patricia's world truly imploded. The psychologist's report declared her displaying signs of paranoid behavior and possible delusional thinking regarding property boundaries and legal authority. The EPA inspector filed a complaint about false environmental reporting. The county attorney requested investigation into her abuse of legal processes. Helen assembled our final evidence package like a master prosecutor building a death penalty case. 912 pages of documented violations, crimes, and fraud spanning 4 years. Security footage compilation showing clear patterns of harassment and trespassing. Financial forensics revealing $367,000 in embezzled HOA funds, David Running. Bears federal sovereignty research confirmed the nuclear option. Federal easement violations that could invalidate every property deed in Oakwood Manor Estates. If the original land transfer violated federal conservation requirements, he explained, the entire development becomes legally questionable. Community support had solidified into an unstoppable force. Local businesses displayed "We Support Tom" banners. Church groups organized prayer vigils for justice and truth in our community. The Veterans Association honored me for defending constitutional property rights against domestic tyranny. Even the school district asked me to teach sustainable living workshops, turning my property into an educational resource instead of the eyesore Patricia claimed it was. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Patricia and banned her from all future meetings. Her own neighbors, the people she'd claimed to protect, turned against her after discovering their assessment money had funded her personal legal battles. First National Bank foreclosed on Patricia's house due to unpaid legal bills and tax liens. The irony was exquisite. The woman who'd tried to steal my property lost her own home to financial fraud consequences. But the sweetest justice came from an unexpected source. Dr. Thornfield's divorce filing revealed Patricia had forged his signature on multiple documents, making him an unwitting accomplice to federal crimes. His cooperation with prosecutors provided the final evidence needed for criminal conspiracy charges. Sarah's news series won a regional journalism award for exposing suburban corruption and government abuse. The story became a template for property rights advocates nationwide, spawning legislation in 8 states to prevent HOA overreach. Standing in my workshop that final evening before court, surrounded by evidence of Patricia's systematic criminality and tools for complete vindication, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Emma's death. Absolute certainty that justice would prevail. Tomorrow, Judge Morrison would end Patricia's reign of terror permanently. The sound of my printer working overtime to produce final evidence copies mixed with autumn wind through my solar array. The same equipment Patricia had tried to destroy. She'd picked the wrong target for her last stand. The courthouse steps buzzed with anticipation like opening day of a major trial. Standing room only didn't begin to describe the scene. Reporters, property rights activists, neighbors, and curiosity seekers packed every available space in Judge Morrison's courtroom. The smell of old wood polish mixed with nervous energy, and the metallic taste of justice about to be served. Patricia arrived 50 minutes late with her 5th lawyer in 8 months. Looking like she'd aged a decade since this began. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the stress fractures, the trembling hands, the hollow eyes, the desperate energy of someone watching their world crumble in real time. I sat calmly with my legal team, thick evidence binders organized on the table like ammunition for a righteous war. Judge Morrison, a 25-year veteran known for his no-nonsense approach to frivolous litigation, surveyed the packed courtroom with the expression of a man who'd seen every kind of legal stupidity imaginable. Patricia's new lawyer, some kid fresh out of law school who'd obviously drawn the short straw, stood up with shaking hands to present her case. "Your Honor," he stammered, "my client seeks enforcement of legitimate HOA authority over non-compliant property that threatens community standards. He couldn't produce valid legal documents showing HOA jurisdiction over my land." When Judge Morrison demanded proof of authority, the kid shuffled through papers like he was playing 52 card pickup. The sound of rustling documents filled the silent courtroom while Patricia's face grew redder by the second. "Counselor," Judge Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades dispensing justice, "do you have any evidence that Mr. Mitchell's property was ever legally subject to HOA authority?" "Well, Your Honor, we believe. That is, it's our understanding. The property appears to be—" "That's a no," the judge concluded. Helen stood up like Moses preparing to part the Red Sea. Her presentation was surgical, methodical, and absolutely devastating. Original 1982 property deed showing explicit exclusion from future HOAs. Survey maps proving my boundaries predated the development by 36 years. Security footage montage showing 4 years of systematic harassment and criminal trespassing. But the financial forensics testimony was the knockout punch. Sarah's investigation had uncovered a paper trail of fraud that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. $367,000 in missing HOA funds, forged incorporation documents, fake vendor invoices for services never performed. David Running Bear's testimony about federal easement violations added constitutional weight to the proceedings. "Your Honor, this development sits on land with unresolved federal conservation claims dating to 1967. The HOA's attempts to exercise authority over excluded parcels violate both state property law and federal treaty obligations." Patricia's mental breakdown began during Helen's presentation and accelerated throughout the testimony. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, gestured at documents, and made increasingly desperate facial expressions as each piece of evidence destroyed her position. Judge Morrison's patience finally snapped when Patricia interrupted testimony to shout, "This is about property values. He's destroying our community with that environmental eyesore." "Ma'am," the judge said sharply, "you'll remain silent or be removed from my courtroom." When Helen presented evidence of the attempted bribery, forged signatures, and false police reports, Patricia's composure evaporated completely. She stood up screaming about property rights terrorists and environmental extremists destroying neighborhood safety. The bailiff stepped forward, but Judge Morrison held up his hand. He wanted everyone to witness Patricia's complete meltdown for the record. "Ms. Thornfield," he said with judicial authority that could silence a riot, "this is the most egregious example of HOA overreach I've witnessed in 25 years on this bench." The courtroom fell silent except for the scratching of reporters' pens capturing every word. Mr. Mitchell's property was never legally subject to HOA authority. The incorporation documents contain forged signatures. The financial records show systematic embezzlement of community funds. The pattern of harassment rises to the level of criminal conspiracy. Patricia's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished delivering justice. I hereby rule that Oakwood Manor Estates HOA lacks any legal standing to make claims against Mr. Mitchell's property. Furthermore, due to the criminal activity uncovered during these proceedings, I'm ordering immediate dissolution of the HOA pending federal investigation. The courtroom erupted in cheers from my supporters while Patricia screamed something about appeal rights and property destruction. The bailiff finally escorted her out as she continued ranting about environmental terrorists and communist property laws. Judge Morrison wasn't done. I'm awarding Mr. Mitchell $143,000 in legal fees and damages for malicious prosecution. The evidence of systematic fraud and harassment warrants referral to federal authorities for criminal prosecution. The gavel's bang echoed through the packed courtroom like thunder announcing the end of a storm. Patricia's 4-year reign of suburban terror was officially over. Local news captured every moment for the evening broadcast. National media picked up the story within hours. Legal experts called it a landmark victory for property rights against HOA tyranny. Standing on the courthouse steps afterward, surrounded by supporters and reporters, I felt Emma's presence stronger than ever. Justice had finally come home. 8 months after Judge Morrison's gavel ended Patricia's reign of terror, I finally understood what Emma meant when she said, "Tom, sometimes losing everything helps you find what really matters." Patricia received 22 months in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The sentencing judge noted that stealing from neighbors while abusing legal processes showed behavior fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Ordered to pay $502,000 in restitution she couldn't afford, Patricia lost her house, her family, and her freedom to the very legal system she'd tried to weaponize. The former Oakwood Manor Estates transformed into something beautiful. Residents formed a voluntary neighborhood association focused on actual community building. No mandatory fees, no architectural review boards, no measuring tape brigades, just neighbors helping neighbors the way Emma always said communities should work. My property became the cover story for sustainable living today. Off-grid paradise. How one man's property rights fight became America's model for environmental responsibility. The delicious irony. Patricia's campaign to eliminate my eyesore had made it a nationally recognized example of sustainable living.